direct use value that's driving these things. And
scalability and marketing solved, and I think you were the one who spoke about the trilemma. Sylvia, do you think that the trilemma still exists? I've heard you speaking about the trilemma not existing anymore. Specifically, a lot of work that we've done about getting scalability on the blockchain. Do you think that the trilemma is still as prevalent?
Well, first of all, let me go with trilemma. So the idea is that it is scalable. And I'm sure that there are some definitional escapes in which you say, oh, and I think we've done tremendous progress, and particularly we are now focused on having a protocol that actually was truly secure, decentralized, and scalable. And so that is, I believe, it should be that we have basic challenges, and when is a community like ours, which is very aggressive, very innovative, we make progress. And so the previous challenge is solved. Now what is the next challenge? By the way, to your first question, I would say, well, it's not one problem. There is many problems. There is so on and so forth. But they don't. The community has already done a big leap in trusting this capability. I think how innovative it was. And so it's incredible, a great idea. And now we started getting covered, and I'm sure that we continue to evolve. It's just a few years. I know that impatient as I am, impatient as all of us are, this progress is fantastic, but things take time. But I think we are going in a good direction.
So let's talk a little bit more practically now. We're talking about the future of blockchains. We've now been around for a while and developed certain applications. What do we mean blockchains? How can blockchains really make our lives better? I want to try and get away from this narrative that we had a long time ago. Everything's going to be decentralized, we're going to overthrow governments. To say, more practically, how can blockchains change our lives?
Yeah, and I think, first of all, there's all of the things that I just talked about in the presentation, about how blockchains are a good platform for creating systems of tools in general that kind of span across large and diverse groups of people. And that's a broad definition, right? That includes money, it includes all of the decentralized finance stuff that's been happening. And I think money and decentralized finance has been providing a lot of value already, right? I remember being done with blockchain so far. And the answer was that up until now, most practically, it's basically that there's people who live in Africa, who work remotely for software companies in places like the US and Europe, and they need money, and they use cryptocurrency to bring the money back home without losing huge percentages of it to Palestinian people doing a similar thing. So it's I think just that is probably the one place where cryptocurrency has touched, not the entire world's lives, but definitely quite a few people's. And I think over time we'll see it broadening from cryptocurrency to all of these other applications as they prove themselves more and more.
So then what do you think is the most important change that blockchain is going to bring to our lives?
Well, so I agree that payment is just, to me, is the ability of injecting trust to enable two people who never met each other and therefore they don't know each other to a bit more interaction and the ability to leverage the trust which is spread across all of us, in which everybody believes, to believe very much. I think this ability to inject trust is going to be the best. By the way, going back, the definition of blockchain, we should understand that when we talk about blockchain, we're not talking about the concept frozen in time of today, right? So blockchain, I believe, is going to be like everything that counts in life, something that is constantly evolving. Life is about intelligence adaptation, and nothing can be useful to life and human life in particular. Blockchain is great, it already has the potential for great progress for humanity. We will maintain the name, but underneath, I hope that actually the meaning of what is a blockchain for humanity is going to change so that we can serve better and better, not only our immediate needs, but also the needs of our future needs and needs of our
rate what they're currently doing to similar blockchain applications or different blockchain applications that achieve the same thing. There's an adage that says something along the lines of that you have to develop something that's not the same or a little bit better, but maybe 10 times or 100 times better. What do you think we need to do to get people to start adopting blockchains as builders in this space?
I think the early adopters are always going to be the higher value adopters and the people for whom there literally is no place to go. And I definitely think we haven't fully exhausted those. Within just payments, there's a lot of people starting to do decentralized finance, and the holy grail there is basically people being able to get access to different kinds of financial exposure. Like if you're in some third world country, then how do you get access to the S&P 500? And if there aren't any existing channels, then some of the decentralized finance systems that people are building are going to give you one of those channels. So that's a kind of natural next step, kind of lower value per person, but that touch even more people. And I think it will just get and every time we expand, that gives us kind of the resources and knowledge that we need to improve usability and scalability and all these other problems that involve
decentralized finance. And it's become a big buzzword. And I think in Algorand, the term of frictionless finance is being thrown around quite a lot. Tell us a little bit about what frictionless finance economy means.
Well, so first of all, let me use it for a lot of things, but I'm really passionate about frictional finance. Let me tell you why. Because even though our lives are many dimensions, and we want to be, it's very important to be free of constricting rules, free of transacting revenue. But the first form of freedom is perhaps financial freedom. If somebody tells you you're free, you can do anything you want, yes, but you are destitute, that's not. So I think that is what is important. Now, frictionless, there are many aspects of friction. Friction of onboarding, friction of actual transaction. And somehow all of this cause humanity to become more and more, finance to become more and more centralized. Just assume that I want to transact with you. I want to swap an asset of mine for an asset of yours, right? But we are at a distance, we barely know each other. What do we do in the real world? We bring in the transaction. But by the way, he or she wants to be paid, okay? But then argues, I must be bigger than the two of you. Because if you have to sue me, well, I must have the real assets. And so therefore, you start saying, this has to be bigger than this. If that want to transact somebody else, it ought to be somebody bigger. You assume you're going to have 7 entities in the world that are going to guarantee any transaction. Wouldn't this be ideal? For them, but for the rest of us, not at all. And similarly, for onboarding, I really believe in technology. I really believe in technology will set us free. But also for onboarding, when the blockchain starts growing, our children say, I want to be on board too. Yes, download the damn chain and keep going. How can I download a terabyte even nowadays? It's not so easy. Oh, then trust somebody. Well, what if I don't trust somebody? I don't know anybody whom I trust. Then again, I choose somebody who's large enough and powerful enough and rich enough that I can go after him for damages if whatever I downloaded for him is not right. And there is centralization. That is a continual battle. I really believe that part of this friction was due to lack of technology. Part of this friction was also due to greed and desire. And I think that we should, at least for the technology part, give wave excuse. Vision as a super centralized system, and certainly we can be much more democratic. We're going to see an explosion of transactions if we achieve this really frictionless finance.
Now, I want to touch on a topic that I know is quite close to both of you, and that's privacy. Silvio, you spent a large part of your life talking about farming, building zero-knowledge proofs. Vitalik, I know you quite. When we look at blockchain is by nature transparent, or supposed to be transparent. How do we merge this privacy rules and specifically zero-knowledge proofs with the blockchain rules?
So, I think like we can't look at kind of privacy as a kind of context-free absolute good, and we can't look at transparency as a kind of context-free absolute good. I think it's sort of privacy of what and the transparency of what that matters. And the things that I think like it makes most sense to build are basically the things that are kind of spread. So, like if there's a system that kind of like has a huge amount of influence over how resources get allocated and kind of how we're encouraged to behave, then the rules of that system are something that should be transparent and open and verifiable by people. But there's, in many cases, there's plenty of legitimate rationale for individuals' activities inside of that system to be private. And
do you believe that privacy is a human right? Do you believe that it's fundamental, that everyone should have privacy? Because when we look at it today, the regulators and the governments, we don't have privacy as such. We're seeing just in our own delisted of several of the big exchanges recently. I mean, do you believe that we have the right to privacy? Or
and I think blockchain ecosystems with no privacy and kind of society with no privacy in general is a very bad idea, right? I mean, a society with no privacy is a society where every single thing you do is an action that you have to calculate to not only for your own benefit, but also to kind of look good inside of the thousands of political games that we all kind of inevitably play and with each other and just can't escape from every day. And I think only with it can we have a world where people are free to do things for their own happiness instead of being trapped in an endless cycle of having to look good in front of everyone else.
Sylvia, you've done a lot of work on privacy. Tell us a little bit about, I mean, when we spoke, you spoke about this term called private transparency. Tell us a little bit about what your views on privacy.
Well, so my view on privacy, I think, we all agree, and I think the investor audience also agrees. I mean, privacy is really perhaps a great engine of freedom, and so we can keep our freedom provided that we can get so true that each one of us has a private persona and a public persona, and both must exist. So I believe that it's very important. I devoted a big chunk of my life to produce, privacy to the hilt, like with zero knowledge proofs, so that they can actually distill what becomes public, the minimum amount that you want and you can determine. And I think that these things are important, and we should have a social consensus if we can, or we can be an experimental consensus. One of the good part of our community is that there are many blockchains. So that is actually a great experimental ground. So some blockchain will experiment more on putting privacy emphasis on some things, some in others, some are going to say remain transparent and public, and we will learn exactly what we want in a market way, or perhaps after we learn it, we'll are going to disperse the right amount in each blockchain. Personally, it could be that if you take zero knowledge proofs and the magic of mathematics around that, I don't need to see anything anymore, because the validity of anything offered to me is okay. But just imagine what kind of a life would be. So I just say, oh, here is a transaction. Is this valid? Oh, yes, see, I did it. So I don't see anything. One of the reasons I want to go on the square, think of it the square like the marketplace, is that I see activity. Very often I go in Seoul and in a different city than mine. I'd love to see what people buy. I don't know who they are, but I can see all the transactions. Isn't this fun? I think it is fun. So we should preserve this fun, and the trick is how to do it. And perhaps we should experiment, and at least at Algon we are experimenting with another idea of a co-chain, which means you are private there, and you are private there, say blue co-chain, red co-chain, but then there is a public permissionless Algon blockchain. And why? Because it allows you to transfer and transact with our private blockchain. So to me that a little bit has a bit more of appeal, because I want to be public, I go in the public square. When I go to my home, I expect some privacy there. So things that we do at home, maybe our family members should be aware, and then however become more public and transparent there. We must have this interplay. I think that being able to to go in and out of privacy, and to have enclaves well defined of privacy, rather than injecting privacy everywhere, it may actually be preferable. But again, we don't have to decide now. There is many projects out there. Let privacy be picked up by some of them, see how we like them, let's react and we'll evolve.
Vitalik, you've shown a big interest in zero-knowledge proofs. What do you think the application of zero-knowledge proofs is specifically for your ecosystem?
Yeah, so I guess, like, first of all, we have to distinguish between the kind of 30-year-long kind of heritage of zero-knowledge proofs in general and this more recent trend in kind of succinct general-purpose zero-knowledge proofs that we've seen in the last 6 years. And, like, this second chunk, like, these things are freaking powerful. Like, first of all, they're privacy technologies. And their privacy technologies that, because of the succinctness properties, are finally efficient enough to be useful for a lot of things. But second, they're also scalability technologies. And the way in which they're scalability technologies is basically that you can have one node do a computation and generate a proof of that computation, and they can then publish this proof, and this proof can be verified by anyone else in the ecosystem much more quickly than it took to generate the proof, right? So I can create a block, and I can run a proof to show that the block is valid. I can publish the block along with the proof, and you, instead of verifying the block by running the computation yourself, you can just check the proof. And so this is one of the kind of key ingredients in kind of making an optimal solution to kind of moving beyond the trilemma, I think, in the longer term. And it's not a necessary one, but it's a really useful one because it allows us to bypass a lot of like honest majority assumptions, like fraud-proof timing assumptions and other things. And so it could really help in making safe and secure blockchains.
Yeah, by the way, they can be synergetic somehow, privacy and zero-knowledge proofs for correctness, right? Because usually, but at the same time, if you obfuscate things somehow, you prevent an adversary to understand what is going on, and therefore you prevent an adversary for play between using zero-knowledge proofs in the form of SNARK or STARK to really achieve part of the thing that we want to achieve, which actually is a correctness, rather than via transparency, via somehow privacy. But, and again, there are so many knobs to play, but in my opinion, we should really roll a concert to put together things and really do it in somehow a better world.
Now, before I get into slightly more personal, and we've been arguing about this, what is decentralized enough, and we've, etc. What steps are you guys taking in your own protocols to ensure decentralization?
Yeah, it's a very good question.
Particularly because we are moving to a proof of stake world. I mean, you've got an airplane that's flying and going to be moving to proof of stake. You guys have launched your airplane with proof of stake. Let's talk about the steps that you're taking in your individual protocols to make sure we're decentralized.
Sure. So I guess, like, first of all, proof of stake in general is a decentralization strategy. And like, I think proof of work did a good job of being extremely decentralized for maybe the first 3 to 4 years of its existence. These are kind of the good old democratic days when people were mostly mining on their own laptops. But I think over time, we clearly see how it kind of collapses into either ASIC farms or large-scale GPU farms, and people without a lot of money have a hard time participating. And with proof of stake, if you have a few coins, you can join. And if you have even a very small number of coins, you can participate on the same level as everyone else. Within Ethereum, so first of all, we're spending a lot of time on designing the protocol so we can handle a very large number of participants, the thousands. And this allows us to reduce the minimum deposit size to about 32 ETH. And another thing is that we're taking a lot of care to make the protocol much more lightweight than ETH1. So if blockchain is bloated, you need an SSD, and it's hard to run a node. And with these two, we're really trying to kind of cut down the minimal specs for participating in a node. Even sharding itself, I think, is a decentralization strategy, right? Because you can totally run an arbitrarily scalable blockchain with no sharding. And the way that you do this is basically that you just require every node in the network to have like a huge data center, and like you can do this, and like it's called a consortium chain. But I think like we collapse over time into like more and more centralization as people kind of get like a lot of kind of smaller decisions around kind of how depositing and withdrawing mechanics works. And we have this entire blog post that our Serenity design rationale where we kind of describe a lot of these details. So it's definitely a kind of evolution of thinking over the course of several years.
So from my side, so first of all, I really want to make a clear appeal to technologists, and because I say decentralization is not going to happen without technology, and we need more. I think that even at a social level, when we try to organize ourselves as in civilization, right? And to say, without much technology, when society were very small, what are you going to do? You are going to have a dictatorship. It's the only form that makes sense. We are going to do whatever the dictator does. End of story. Even to have, representative democracies on a little bit of larger scale. I'm Italian, so I just look at the example of my ancestors, the Romans. They had elections 1 a year. Okay. Now, okay, everybody has to go to Rome to vote. I mean, without technology, you can't even support this. But what technology? Well, you must have roads, because if you go to Rome and vote, right? And if you have not enough infrastructure for places to stay in a secure fashion, if you are going to be robbed or killed on the way to vote, nobody would vote, okay? So right now, we are at the possibility with really the permissionless blockchain, if we manage to do things on a proper scale, or to have a form of direct self-regulation. But humanity never had the technology for doing it. So we are getting there. So that is very important to the decentralization is lovely, but we need more and better technology. But here we are at the specific state. For the reason that Vitalik said, proof of work was decentralized for 1, 2, 3 years. And after that, they lost interest in being decentralized. De facto, not because of malice, because it becomes so costly that fewer and fewer players can afford it. So, but in proof of stake, we privilege anybody else should experiment with different things. The nice part about Main is that we can experiment. What is pure proof of stake? It means that every token that you have contributes to the consensus problem. Okay, that's what it means. And we don't have to have actually to lower the bar of how many tokens we should have. The problem is technologically so sophisticated that can allow any token or even a single token on the table bonded for some reason. Your token can be whenever you want. In your wallet, ready to be spent at your fingertips. It can be invested in one of the many opportunities the blockchain offers to you, particularly financial opportunities. And wherever it is, you have the ability to use for voting. And without taking much computation. So I think that is our interpretation. I'm sure and hope it's not the only one, but we need ideas of this case, of this type, where we can put more and more of us to participate to consensus, to take charge, to be real citizens of this.
Every token in the network is a participant in proof of stake. How do you prevent bad actors in a consensus algorithm like that?
Why do you have to prevent it? So that you have to orchestrate the protocol so that if the majority of the money is in honest hands, the protocol works. So one way to do it, which is a bit simpler technologically, but it could have also advantages in some other way, is to say, well, let's tokens determine the block on behalf of all of us, right? So, but that is delegated proof of stake is one, there is bonded proof of stake, there is all kinds of other things, proof of work is another. They suffer, in my opinion, and I don't want to overgeneralize this, of the following problem. The logic, which is a bit questionable in my mind, is the whole economy is secure, of the economy are honest. Personally, I think this is a recipe for disaster. Because who are these small part of the economy in Bitcoin? The miners. So, I mean, I don't know if there are economists here in the room, but you say in the GDP of the world, what fraction is represented by the miners? Do you want to have that the entire economy goes into their hands? I think it's a bad idea. In delegated proof of stake, what are these small part of economy? They could be the delegate. It doesn't matter if it's 21, 50, 100 or more. So that is a way that has something bizarre to it. When you instead you depend on the majority of the money to be in all the stands, their reasoning goes a little bit different. I cannot so easy within the system go and bribe a few miners or a few things to bring down the economy. It should be that the majority of the token holders collude with each other to bring down that very economy of which they have a majority of. I think that this is a kind of hard to happen. So that's why I'm passionate about this approach, but very to be centralized. Because somehow our bodies are not centralized. Nobody says, who is in charge to tell the T cell to boost up my immune system? It doesn't work that way. When we orchestrate things, when you design things, somehow become centralized naturally. So we should...
So what you're saying is, in a nutshell, you're not a big fan of Libra.
Well, I'm saying...
I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yes, I mean, I see it as... Vitalik might see, I don't want to put in this word also. So it's 100 people, friends of each other, co-located in North America, who should decide for us to be really? The world is a bit of a better place, and I'm surprised there's somebody that don't like Americans. Can you believe it? Well, would they like those 100 people? I wonder. So, there is diversity in the world, and I think if you want to celebrate diversity, if you want to be decentralized, it's not going to be 100 people or 1,000 people. It really should be a system that holds all of us into play.
Very, very good answer. Now, I want to break away from technology and decentralization and all of those things. And I want to actually get to the more personal side of why we're doing what we're doing. And Sylvia, I want to start with you because you are possibly the most decorated person in cryptography in the world, or certainly that we know today in the world. And you were around before Satoshi Nakamoto, and you've been around after Satoshi Nakamoto. What's the difference? How did Satoshi Nakamoto's paper change cryptography?
Well, let's put the first one. So Satoshi Nakamoto, but he has done something better. So what he has done, he has used very elementary cryptography to provide a very brilliant solution to the older problem of consensus. Okay? So somehow, for instance, given you already know how much age distance is between me and Vitalik, so I granted my first PhD to a wonderful graduate student at MIT, and in 1985, and
so Vitalik was one.
Vitalik,
so Sylvia had his first PhD when Vitalik turned one.
But really, I'll tell you the truth, that is good. So you are a professor because you love to interact with students who are younger than you. And I think that's the only way the world works. And so I think it's one of them should drive forward. And some experience somehow may help. Here it would help, at least in my case. So I got Byzantine agreement. We've had cryptography. It was a very strange architecture of bivariate polynomials, complications like this, 85-page paper. And then suddenly, eventually, I learned about a Bitcoin.
When did you learn about Bitcoin?
Actually, very late, because it was very cozy in my ivory tower, doing my own research. I would say 15, 16, something like this. Yeah.
And I mean, we are running out of time, and I really want to get to Vitalik as well. But Sylvia, you've been sitting in the ivory tower of education and academics for so long, but now you've taken the jump from education and academics, and now you've joined a project. I mean, you're backed by VCs. You've got big names behind you. What was the rationale to move from that to running commercially?
I'm an impatient man. I really believe in science. I think science will change the world if properly used. So we must make sure that it's properly used. So I was at the very beginning of the inception of public key cryptography. It took 25 years before somebody signed that transaction. So all of a sudden, I was very frustrated So, by the way, which was to use different type of consensus, proof of work. Now it's going back at least one time in this area. But, and I think that the only way to do it is to say, to roll up your sleeves and get there and get things adopted as fast as you can, rather than hoping, if they're a good idea, somebody will sooner or later will adopt them. That model didn't quite work, at least it did not work as fast as I wanted.
So 30, 40 years from now, what do you want to be remembered? What do you want your legacy to be in this blockchain space 30 years from now, 40 years from now? Vitalik will ask you the same question, but in about 300 years.
Well, let's say, I really hope this pure proof of stake type of approach. I think it is good from a technical way, but actually to have really a frictionless finance to contribute to it, frictionless finance, and technically there's a proof of stake protocol, which is a bit more complicated, but actually can be your friend really, if you once you understand it.
Vitalik, so, you've got a list of achievements in this industry at such a young age, which is probably unparalleled for the founder or the writer of the white paper of the second biggest protocol at the moment. But when you wake up every morning, and putting the technology itself aside, is it to keep developing new cool shit and to make the protocol to be much more efficient? Or is there a bigger purpose when you wake up in the morning?
It's some of both. I definitely think that blockchains are new bullshit, and I hope that they continue to become even cooler. But also, I believe in the promise of the decentralized economy, and this idea that on top of these platforms we can build new things and new platforms and institutions that can be much more free, open, and inclusive than the things that came before.
So I know that you have a big interest in longevity, and you spend a long time thinking about longevity. So under the assumption that you're going to live for another 150 years, more or less.
I prefer 150 million, but
So under the assumption that you're going to you sit back and say, this vision, all this work that I've done, this is really paid off, and I know this because when I look around me, what happens?
Can we predict? I guess, I don't know, sometimes the future takes weird twists and turns, right? So, for example, if you look at something like Linux, right, it's been kind of this big dream of let's use open source to take over and source operating system on their computers, and that it's gotten somewhere, but it's not gotten as far as people hoped. But then at the same time, we're using Android on our phones, which is basically Linux. Half the world economy runs on Linux. So I think the way that blockchains succeed could easily be very different from the way that we imagine that it succeeds today. And I think because of that, it's also just important to, there also is a difference between blockchains and what our values are. And it's important to be possible. Because if it turns out that blockchains just get used by every bank to improve high frequency financial efficiency by 3.9%, then that will be quote mass adoption, but that won't be something meaningful that everybody excited about. And I think looking at specifically are we going in a way that actually gives us more the things that we're actually here for is also something that's important to keep in the back of your mind.
When you think about your achievements to date at such a young age, do you sometimes look at the stuff that you've achieved? Are you proud, or are you still work in progress and under
progress?
Do you celebrate what you've achieved until today?
Yeah, and I think the space's achievements until today have definitely been significant, but I think we're halfway up the exponential curve, but if you look at that the y-coordinate, halfway up the exponential curve is still really close to zero. So we have a long way to go.
So for you, 300 years time, how do you want to be remembered?
I don't know.
people. That is all the time. So I would have loved to have answered some Italian, but I guess not.